My daughter sent me a Father's Day card, but it was addressed to someone else. I laughed it off at first, until I saw my wife's handwriting inside and realized it wasn't a mistake, it was a message. What happened next was rather unbelievable. I will tell you how everything unfolded. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Alice Tracy from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. Father's Day had never been about grand gestures in our house. It was always quiet. Some coffee, a hug from my daughter, maybe a homemade card with a goofy drawing on the front, and a sentence or two that made me tear up more than I'd admit. That morning started no differently. The sun cut through the blinds in thin golden slats, and the smell of toast and coffee wafted in from the kitchen. I stretched in bed, feeling the creak in my knees and the familiar ache in my lower back, the kind of pain that reminded me I was no longer the energetic father who used to carry his daughter on his shoulders through amusement parks and mall parking lots. Still, there was something comforting in that ache, proof that I'd been present, that I'd put in the work. I had done my part. I came downstairs in my robe, and there it was waiting for me on the counter. A little Hallmark card, pink and gold, with tulips and cartoon sparkles printed across the front. To the best dad, it read in curly letters. I smiled. It was exactly what I expected. I picked it up, turned it over like I always did, searching for the scribbled signature, the telltale heart drawn over the I in her name. But the envelope gave me pause. It wasn't sealed. And then I noticed the handwriting. It was my daughter's, sure, but the way it was addressed didn't make sense. It said, "To the best Uncle Dad." My eyebrows lifted. I let out a short laugh, thinking she must have been trying to be funny. Maybe it was some inside joke I'd forgotten. Maybe she was teasing me for always being the fun uncle type of dad. It didn't sting at first. It genuinely made me chuckle. I called out toward the kitchen, "Hey, what's this mean, Uncle Dad?" But no one answered. The clink of dishes had stopped. I sat down, flipping the card open, expecting her usual message about how I worked too much, but still made time to help her with math, or how I always knew the best shows to binge watch. Instead, I read a message that didn't belong to me. The words were tender, adoring. "Thank you for always being there for me in a way he never was. You make me feel seen, safe, and loved." I never thought I'd find this kind of connection. It was signed with love, not by my daughter, but here was the jarring part. In my wife's handwriting, I'd recognized that looping "why anywhere," the way she always put a little swirl at the end of her words. My heart stalled. I reread the message 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the reality settled like cold steel in my stomach. This wasn't my card. This wasn't a joke. I stared at the card, frozen, while something inside me began to fracture. The realization spread through me like a crack in glass, slow, jagged, and devastating. My wife had written this message, and it wasn't for me. The Uncle Dad wasn't a joke. It was a reference, a clue. And then it hit me, my younger brother, my own flesh and blood. He had been around a lot lately, always dropping by, always finding reasons to help out around the house, especially when I was traveling for work. I had even praised him for it, told my wife how grateful I was that he was trying to be more involved with family. I felt like a fool, a blind, trusting fool. I called out again, louder this time, but the house was eerily quiet. No footsteps, no clatter of breakfast plates. I got up, card still in my hand, and walked into the kitchen. Empty. Just the scent of cooling toast and the sound of the refrigerator humming steadily, like it didn't know the world had just tilted off its axis. My daughter's bedroom door was shut. My wife's phone was missing from the charger. I stood there in the kitchen, holding a piece of cardboard that had just detonated everything I thought I knew. My hands trembled, not from rage, not yet, but from the sheer weight of what I was beginning to suspect. It was such a small thing, a greeting card. But in that moment, it became a wrecking ball to the structure of my life. All the nights I worked late so I could provide, all the birthday parties I planned, the anniversaries I never missed. It all flashed before me, overlaid by that single, devastating message written in my wife's familiar script. I was standing in the ruins of a life I had spent decades building, and it had all started with a card meant for someone else. I didn't sit down again. I just stood there, still gripping the card in my hand like it might somehow change if I held it long enough, like the words might rearrange themselves into something more benign, something less cruel. But the handwriting didn't lie. I'd stared at that handwriting on birthday cards, sticky notes on the fridge, shopping lists, and anniversary letters for over 20 years. I knew it like I knew my own name. Those curves and flourishes had once made me feel loved, tethered, known. Now they felt like knife wounds dressed in ink. My mouth was dry, my pulse hammering in my ears. A kind of nausea bloomed in my stomach, heavy and sour. I had to know. I needed to know, right now, what the hell this was. I took my phone and called her. Once. Twice. No answer. Then I called my brother. I didn't even know what I'd say if he picked up, but I needed to hear his voice. I needed to hear whether it carried guilt. His phone went straight to voicemail. I stood in the hallway for a full minute, just listening to the silence of the house. It was deafening. I went into the office where she usually kept her journals, her receipts, her neatly stacked bills and color-coded folders. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but pride was a luxury I could no longer afford. I opened drawers, flipped through notebooks, and there it was, tucked in the back of her planner, a small bundle of letters, tied with a ribbon I remembered giving her years ago on Valentine's Day. I untied them with trembling fingers. The first one was dated over 2 years ago. It started innocently enough, something about gratitude for always listening, always understanding me better than he does. My stomach turned. The he was me. She was writing about me, to my brother. The letters grew more intimate, more vulnerable, then crossed into unmistakable territory. References to nights I'd been out of town, that weekend in Tahoe, and phrases like, if only things were different. I wanted to stop reading, but I couldn't. I had to know how deep it went. One letter spoke about our daughter, how confused she seemed, how she called him Uncle Dad, once by accident, and they laughed it off. That phrase again. The joke that wasn't a joke. I slumped into the office chair, suddenly drained, holding the letters like they were made of fire. My wife and my brother. Two of the people I trusted most in the world. It was surreal. I kept waiting for the punchline, the twist, the moment where someone burst into the room, shouting, "Gotcha!" But it never came. All I had were these words, tangible proof that I had been living in a parallel reality, blind to the truth hiding in plain sight. All the excuses made sense now. The lingering hugs. The quick glances I caught when they didn't know I was looking. The way she used to light up when he entered the room. A brightness I hadn't seen aimed at me in years. I couldn't breathe properly. I stood up and paced the room like a caged animal, fury pulsing through my limbs. I wanted to destroy something. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I just sat back down and stared at the floor for what felt like an hour. All I could think about was the betrayal, not just theirs, but my own, for being so damn blind to it. I prided myself on reading people, on being sharp, observant. I ran a business built on intuition and strategy. Yet in my own home, under my own roof, I had been outplayed by the two people I had trusted with my life. Eventually, I called a private investigator. I didn't tell him much, just asked him to look into their movements over the past year. I needed facts. I needed something solid to hold on to, because my mind was slipping fast into a place I didn't like, where nothing felt real, where every memory was tainted. I also texted my daughter, "Where are you?" She replied an hour later, "With Mom." Why? I stared at the screen. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't know what to say. What could I say? That I discovered the secret she'd probably been living with in silence? That I was sorry for not seeing it sooner? That night, I slept on the couch, alone in the dark, holding a cold beer I never drank. I just held it, as if it could numb me from the inside out. The house felt cavernous and cruel, echoing with memories that no longer belonged to me. The wedding photo on the mantel mocked me. The family portraits along the hallway walls felt like they had been taken in someone else's life. I thought about waking up and pretending none of it had happened, but I knew that was impossible now. Something had cracked open, and I could never unsee it. The handwriting had told the truth. And the truth was, I had been betrayed, not just as a husband or a brother, but as a father. That card was never meant for me. It was meant to be hidden. But somehow, fate, or maybe my daughter's silent rebellion, had placed it in my hands. And I would never forgive them for it. I didn't sleep much that night. Just drifted in and out of shallow, angry dreams where voices argued in muffled tones, and I was always standing just outside the door, unable to get in. By morning, I was running on fumes and bitterness. My hands felt swollen from gripping the edge of the couch too tightly in the night. I had never confronted anything like this before. I'd faced betrayal in business, sure, people trying to undercut me, steal clients, lie to my face. But this wasn't a boardroom. This was my goddamn family. And the battlefield wasn't a contract or a conference room. It was my home, my heart. They came back mid-morning. I heard the car pull into the driveway and the engine cut off. My wife came in first, keys jangling in her hand, moving with that casual confidence that suddenly repulsed me. My daughter trailed behind her, face buried in her phone. Neither of them noticed the stack of letters on the kitchen table at first. I was standing right there, arms folded, card in hand like a loaded weapon. "Where were you?" I asked. My voice didn't shake, but there was a coldness in it that surprised even me. My wife blinked, confused. "We went out for breakfast. You were asleep when we left." "I wasn't," I said flatly. "I read the card." Her face dropped like a curtain being yanked down. She opened her mouth, probably to offer some feeble explanation, but I raised the card. "I also found the letters," I added, and pointed to the table. "Do you want to sit down? Or should I just ask you outright how long you've been screwing my brother behind my back?" The room fell so silent I could hear the hum of the refrigerator again. My daughter looked up, startled. "Dad, no," I said sharply, without looking at her. "You don't speak right now. You knew too, didn't you?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence was confirmation enough. My wife looked pale, her mouth trembling, but no words coming out. Finally, she whispered, "Please, can we talk about this privately?" "Oh, now you want privacy?" I laughed bitterly. "You should have thought about that before you used my house, my money, and my trust as a playground for your little affair." "How long, Emily? Give me a number." She shook her head. "Eyes wet now." "It wasn't like that. How long?" She swallowed. 3 years. The number hit me like a punch to the chest. I staggered slightly, catching myself on the counter. 3 years. That meant it started during our last family vacation. That meant birthdays, holidays, business trips, all of it had been a cover. I looked at her, truly looked, and realized I didn't recognize the woman in front of me anymore. "I want you out," I said. "Both of you. Today." "What?" my daughter said, stepping forward. "Dad, please, don't," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't beg for a version of me you've already discarded. You chose your mother. You covered for them. You lied to me, looked me in the eye every day while this was happening." She was scared. Emily cut in, her tone suddenly defensive. "This wasn't her fault. Don't punish her for our mistakes." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said, my voice calmer now. Dead calm. "I'm cleaning house." They both stared at me, stunned. I didn't raise my voice again. I didn't throw anything. I didn't break down. But the conviction in my words was final. I wasn't the man they could manipulate anymore. I had been humiliated enough. My wife began to cry in earnest, talking about therapy and forgiveness, about how confused she'd been. She said she didn't know how it started, that it was never meant to go this far. I let her speak. I wanted her to get it all out, every excuse, every rationalization. I listened with the detachment of a man watching the end of a film he'd already seen too many times. Once they were gone, I called my brother. He picked up, cheerful. "Hey man, what's up?" "You're fired," I said. Effective immediately. "I'll have HR send the paperwork." Silence. "Wait, what?" "I know about you and Emily," I said. "I read everything. You crossed a line you can never uncross." He stammered. "Look, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. I swear to God, I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't mean to get caught." I corrected him. "And you didn't just hurt me. You torched everything we built, our business, our family. You're not my brother anymore. Don't call me again." I hung up, and for the first time in days, I felt clear. Hollow, but clear. The hardest part wasn't the silence that followed once they were gone. It wasn't the echoes of their voices in the hall or the empty imprint left on the bed where she used to sleep. No, the hardest part was the stillness inside me, the eerie calm that took over once the anger had burned itself out. I thought I'd feel relief. I expected some satisfaction in reclaiming control. But what I felt instead was a heavy, aching emptiness that clung to my skin like damp clothing. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, not moving, just staring at the lines in the wood grain, wondering how long it would take before my home stopped feeling like a crime scene. I didn't call anyone, not at first. Not my mother, who always worried more than she let on. Not my best friend, who would have told me to breathe and come over for a drink. I didn't want pity. I didn't want support. I wanted isolation. I wanted the sting of the truth to settle into my bones, because if I let it numb too soon, I knew I'd question my choices. And there was no room for that now. The truth had been delivered, handwritten and sealed. No erasing it. The next few days were a blur of logistics. I changed the locks. Had HR process the termination paperwork for my brother. He'd been with the company since we started it, a scrappy operation we ran out of my garage back in our 20s. I'd given him a seat at the table because he was blood, not because he earned it, but because I thought loyalty mattered more than skill. That belief had cost me more than I could ever calculate. When the announcement went out to staff, there were murmurs, questions. Some people asked if he'd been embezzling, if it was criminal. I didn't clarify. I didn't owe them the story. I owed myself the distance. My ex-wife, moved into a short-term rental with our daughter. She texted a few times in the beginning, mostly practical things. Insurance info, mail forwarding, access to joint accounts. I responded when necessary, short and clinical. She tried to slide in personal notes at the end of those messages. I hope you're eating, or I miss the way you made coffee in the mornings. I ignored them. She didn't get to mourn what she destroyed. That was mine to do, and I wasn't interested in grieving with my executioner. My daughter's messages were harder to bear. They came in the evenings, usually when I imagined she was in bed, feeling guilty, replaying the confrontation. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to hurt you. Please talk to me. I read them all. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready. I didn't know what kind of relationship we could have now, if any. She'd grown up in the same house I did, a house where secrets never stayed buried long. And yet, she'd made the choice to keep this one. Maybe out of fear. Maybe out of loyalty to her mother. Maybe because, in some twisted way, she thought she was protecting me. But that didn't soften the sting. She wasn't a child anymore. She'd known what betrayal looked like. She just chose not to tell me. Friends started reaching out. Some cautiously, others with outrage. A few had suspicions, people always do, but no one had said anything before. That angered me more than I admitted. Had they protected me or themselves? I didn't know. I wasn't ready to sift through it. My world had been split down the middle, and the debris was still falling. One evening, I stood in the garage, the same one where my brother and I had launched our business. There were still old photos pinned to a corkboard, shots from our first client meeting, a celebratory dinner where we toasted with cheap champagne. I stared at one photo where he had his arms slung around my shoulder, both of us grinning like idiots. I ripped it off the board and dropped it into the trash without a second thought. There was no nostalgia left in me for that version of him, that version of us. I hired a lawyer, finalized the divorce terms within a month. She didn't fight me on anything, maybe out of guilt, maybe because she knew she had no footing to stand on. I kept the house, the business, and the quiet. She took her things, and the woman I once fell in love with became someone I'd nod to in passing at a parent-teacher meeting, if that. The most painful moment came when I realized I didn't miss them. Not really. What I missed was the idea of them, the illusion. The story I'd told myself for years, that I had a solid marriage, a supportive brother, a daughter who would always come to me first. That story had unraveled the moment I opened that damn card. And now, all that was left was the truth. It was bitter, but it was real. And I decided then that I'd rather live alone in truth than surrounded by lies dressed in love. Weeks passed, then a month. The house got quieter with every sunrise. I found myself listening for noises I used to take for granted, the slam of a car door, the hum of laughter coming from the upstairs hallway, the clatter of dishes from the kitchen while my wife sang along to whatever playlist she'd made that week. But there was nothing now. Just the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock and the occasional creak of settling wood. I was alone with my thoughts, and they were anything but peaceful. I tried to stay busy. I buried myself in work, showed up early to the office, stayed late. I told myself I was being productive, but really, I was hiding. There's something ironic about pouring your energy into a business built with someone who betrayed you. Every spreadsheet, every meeting, every document with my brother's initials at the bottom felt like a ghost flicking my shoulder. I'd erased his presence on paper, reassigned his projects, even removed his name from the official records. But it wasn't that easy to scrub him from my mind. One night, I stayed at the office until midnight. I sat at my desk with a glass of scotch, lights dimmed, the city outside buzzing quietly through the windows. I scrolled through old emails. There were hundreds of them, short notes, dumb jokes, serious talks about company direction. Emails where he told me he was proud of what we'd built, that he looked up to me. Lies, all of them. But part of me didn't want to delete them. Part of me still searched those sentences for something real, some clue I'd missed that could explain how love could rot into betrayal without ever showing its face. I thought about our childhood. He'd been the baby of the family. I protected him from bullies, gave him half of my allowance when he lost his, taught him how to drive, helped him through his first heartbreak. When he dropped out of college, I didn't lecture him. I hired him. I made space for him in my life, my business, my home. And somehow, he still wanted what I had, my wife, my family, my life. That wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. But the part that twisted the knife was this. I missed my daughter more than I could admit. Her silence, once a relief, was now unbearable. I kept waiting for a knock at the door, a call, something more than the short text she'd sent weeks ago. I didn't know what version of me she saw now. The angry father who told her to leave? The victim? The villain? I hated that I didn't know. I hated that I'd let that card, not the one she meant for me, but the one I was never meant to see, define everything between us. Had she really known the full extent of what was happening? Or had she just sensed something wrong and chosen to pretend like I had, because confronting the truth meant shattering everything? I started seeing a therapist. My assistant recommended her, quiet woman, mid-40s, sharp-eyed and soft-spoken. The first session, I just sat there. I didn't know where to start. She didn't push, just waited. Eventually, the words spilled out. Not in order, not neatly, but raw and jagged and full of rage. I talked about the card, the handwriting, the letters, my brother, my wife, my daughter, the loneliness, the shame, the guilt, the feeling that maybe, somehow, I'd driven them all away. Why do you think you're holding on to the idea that this was your fault? She asked gently. Because if it wasn't, I said, then it means I let people this close who were capable of doing this. And that scares me more than anything. She nodded. It's hard to admit we misjudged people we loved. But it's not your shame to carry. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because some part of me still believed it was. I had built this life. I'd chosen these people. How could I not take responsibility for how it all turned out? I didn't have an answer, even after weeks of sessions. But something changed the day I received a letter. Handwritten, no return address, but I knew the writing instantly. It was my daughter's. I opened it slowly, fingers trembling, heart racing. Inside was a simple note. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to choose. But I miss you. I love you. I hope one day you'll want to see me again. L. I read it over and over. It wasn't enough. But it was something. A spark in the darkness. And for the first time since the card, I let myself cry. Not out of anger, not even out of pain, but because I realized that maybe I didn't have to carry all the weight alone anymore. Maybe I could choose who got to be part of my story moving forward. I met her at a small park not far from where she and her mother were staying. It was her idea, public space, neutral ground. I hadn't responded to the letter right away. I'd carried it in my coat pocket for 3 days, rereading it in parking lots and waiting rooms, unsure what response would be right. But on the 4th morning, I woke up and knew. I wasn't looking for closure anymore. I was looking for clarity. If there was anything left between us worth saving, I needed to see it in her eyes. She was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench beneath a maple tree. She looked older than I remembered, heavier around the eyes, posture a little guarded. She stood when she saw me and smiled, hesitant. I didn't rush to hug her. I needed to see if the sincerity in that letter carried into the space between us now. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. I nodded. "Hi." There was a long pause where neither of us knew what to do. Then we both laughed, quietly, awkwardly. She gestured toward the bench, and we sat. The park was quiet. A father and son tossed a frisbee in the distance. A woman walked her dog. Life went on, even when yours fell apart. "I'm glad you came," she said. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. "I almost didn't," I replied, not unkindly. "But your letter, it felt real. That's all I ever wanted. Honesty." She nodded, biting her lip. I didn't know how to handle it. What was happening between them? I was scared you'd hate me if I said something. I told myself I was protecting you. "I get that," I said. And I did. But silence is its own kind of betrayal. I needed you to be my daughter, not their shield. She looked down. "I know. I'm sorry. We talked for a long time. About the months I missed, the therapy sessions she'd started too, the guilt she carried and how it gnawed at her. I didn't forgive her, not fully. Not yet. But I understood her better. I saw her as someone trying to make sense of chaos she never asked for. In that way, we were more alike than I wanted to admit. She asked if I wanted to rebuild something with her. I told her I wasn't sure what that looked like yet. But I was willing to try, one coffee, one walk, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. That seemed to be enough for both of us. Later that week, I visited my father's grave for the first time in nearly a year. I brought that card with me, the one that started it all. I didn't read it again. I'd memorized every curve of every letter. But I wanted to leave it behind, physically, spiritually. I laid it at the base of the headstone and stood there for a long while. "You always told me to be the bigger man," I said aloud. "But I think sometimes being the bigger man means knowing when to walk away." There was no response, of course. Just the wind rustling through the trees. I drove home with the windows down, music low, feeling a lightness I hadn't known in months. The house was still quiet when I got there, but it didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt like mine. Every corner, every photo I hadn't taken down yet, every echo in the hall, it belonged to me now. Not as a shrine to what was lost, but as proof that I had survived it. I made dinner that night. One plate, one glass, no distractions. Just me and a slow, steady peace settling into the spaces where pain used to live. I wasn't waiting for forgiveness or reconciliation or revenge. I wasn't rebuilding the past. I was building something new, and this time, it would be mine alone. If this story moved you, resonated with something you've experienced, or made you reflect on the boundaries we set with family, make sure to subscribe for more raw, real-life stories of betrayal, resilience, and personal growth. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all and your voice matters here. See you soon in the next story.